Thanks for joining, guys. David Horgan is my name. So as Dorinda said, the format this morning, the presentation will be quite short, I think around 20 minutes. We'll get into a demo. Again, that should be reasonably short, around 25 minutes, I would think. Then, so there's a 2-hour slot. So we'll stay for the 2 hours. In the meantime, when we finish, you guys will have access to live labs environments. So if you want to go ahead and complete the workshop, then in your own time, myself and Smita will be here and we can troubleshoot if you have any issues with that. So let's crack on with it. So just the usual safe harbor statement, just to say nothing's legally binding in here. So just get that one out of the way. So what's going on in data security right now? Okay, so this is our third security session in a row. So we've covered a lot of the general issues. We did a fairly extensive session on ransomware and minimizing the damage associated with it 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, it's worth having a look back. All the previous sessions are available on demand on the registration page. So that was looking at the advanced security product, which has 2 strands to it. So one is TDE, transparent data encryption, and the second is data redaction. So today we'll be looking at the second strand in terms of data redaction. So we're going to look at something slightly different. Okay, so we look at some statistics about insider threats and internal breaches, and also how the rise of remote working during the pandemic actually contributed to some breaches. So just a few statistics here. So 20% of organizations faced a security breach as a direct result of a remote worker. 44% of organizations didn't provide any or enough cybersecurity training based on threats that would arise from working remotely. A lot of enterprises just weren't prepared adequately for this. And I'm sure this is coincidental, but the same percentage of breaches were caused by internal actors in 2020. So that's both malicious and accidental breaches. And just a couple that we did cover previously, but they are worth re-mentioning here. So in 2021, the average cost of a global data breach was $4 million, but in the US that rose to over $8 million. And 60% of small to medium businesses that suffer from a hack or a data breach, they will actually fold within 6 months. So pretty shocking statistics. And again, it just underlines that concept of, yep, sure, it does cost to put a security posture in place. It does cost money to build security infrastructure, but if you cut corners, if you don't do it, it could be so much more expensive, and it could even see you out of business. And 2 weeks ago as well, we spoke about ransomware. And now, as part of the campaign to get ransomware installed on your system, these cyber criminals, they're not just blindly spamming people and hoping that you click a link anymore. They're actually actively targeting disgruntled employees to act maliciously on their behalf and install the malware on a company's network. And they'll offer you a cut of the ransom. Whether they'll actually pay you or not might be a different story. But that's one of the more recent trends. So that's an actual excerpt there. So just one thing to take from today. Look, we do speak to a lot of customers in lots of different industries about security, and they'll often say, "We're fine. We've got a firewall." Okay, and a firewall is great, but in isolation, it's never ever going to be enough to totally secure your database, because there's a huge surface of attack. Okay, there's multiple ways to gain access to the data. Just some of the ways that you could get at it. If a DBA account or an end user account was compromised, that account can be used to directly access the database, be that either through the application or through a SQL client. Even if we have the database permissions locked down, we're working off the method of least privilege. We're using really strong passwords, all that kind of thing. If someone can actually just access the host server and the data is unencrypted, they'll be able to see every piece of data in the database by just running one command against the underlying data files. Again, we saw this in the previous workshop, and it is quite shocking when you see how easy it can be to do it. So it just underscores how important encryption actually is as a means of securing your database. So data as well, not just at rest, but data in transit, data traveling over the network can be susceptible to packet sniffing or SQL injection style attacks. If the database has an unpatched vulnerability, hackers will have automated toolkits. They can exploit those vulnerabilities. And then finally down here, you've got non-production copies of the database. And I've seen it myself. I was a DBA for many years. Often these are just direct clones of production, okay, without any regression or remediation work done to them, and they're very rarely monitored as closely as a production environment would be. So if you are just copying it, you're not masking or anything like that. Essentially what you have there in your test and development environments is a direct copy of production that isn't as secure as a production environment. So just to take from it, there's multiple ways that can be exploited to steal your data. So we do need to take a multifaceted approach to security. So how do we do that? So we have what Oracle calls the maximum security architecture. The maximum security architecture, that this isn't one off-the-shelf product, this is multiple products working together in tandem. So let's just quickly go through a few of them. It's just going to be an overview. Now, if you are interested in hearing about any more of any of these products, if you'd like to see a demo on these, directly for your own company, please do reach out. We could set that up for you. So just a few to highlight. So advanced security, as we said, so we've got two strands: transparent data encryption and redaction. Okay, what's the point in this? So if your data is stolen, the first thing that you're going to be asked is the data encrypted? Okay, and if it's not, and if you suffer a breach and your data, your customer's data, whatever it is, sensitive data is leaked, you're potentially looking at a huge fine there. Okay, so TDE, as we saw previously, encrypts data on disk, in backups, in exports. Redaction, what that does is, it redacts what a non-privileged user can see at the front end of the application. And we'll go into that in much more detail shortly. We've got a product like Database Vault. So what Database Vault is, an ongoing access control solution. So it can do things like segregate duties between, an application DBA and infrastructure DBA. It can do multi-factor authorization. It can prevent configuration changes at certain times of day when changes generally shouldn't happen. It can prevent logins from an IP address or a part of the world where the database generally isn't accessed from. So the key concept there is the vast majority of database activity is repetitive and predictable. So anything out of the norm is generally a red flag, and it's an indication of an attempted breach. Okay, so Database Vault will really help with that. It will really reduce all those risks that are associated. We've got Audit Vault and Database Firewall, two separate products, but are sold with one license. Audit Vault, what this does is collects audit data from the application, the database, the host operating system, and it stores it securely in a centralized repository, and it's immutable. So the thinking here is, if you have a breach on your database server, any clever hacker is going to go in, take whatever they need, and then purge the audit logs and cover their tracks. Okay, that's not possible if you have the audit activity being constantly streamed out to Audit Vault. What Database Firewall does is, again, it's that concept of repetitive, predictable activity. So it will examine SQL statements coming into the database, it'll look for anything unusual, and it'll prevent the SQL injection attack. Data masking and subsetting, what that does is it takes a copy of your production data, brings it to development or UAT, non-production environments. It will replace any sensitive data that you have with realistic looking data. We'll speak a little bit more about that shortly. Database Vault there, Key Vault, what that does is it generally works hand in hand with transparent data encryption. And again, it's one we spoke about 2 weeks ago. So you can centrally manage your encryption keys, manage your keys in a centralized repository. Really, really useful tool, and it's a critical part of that minimizing damage associated with a ransomware attack that we spoke about. So look, just the key thing to take from it is, I guess, you might have a DBA in your organization, you might be a DBA yourself. You'll often try and script things or customizations to narrow down that surface of attack. But those customized solutions, they need a whole lot of ongoing maintenance and administration to make sure that you're being kept up to date with evolving threats. There's a ton of work involved there. So for a more comprehensive offering, for an enterprise grade solution, you need to be looking at some of the products here in the maximum security architecture. One that we didn't touch on there, the database security assessment tool. So right now, what this does, we ran a session on this about 4 weeks ago too. What this will do is, it's free. It will run against your database and it will highlight anywhere that you may have introduced risk into your environment. It'll produce a very comprehensive report, highlighting things like users might be overprivileged, are the data files encrypted, is auditing switched on, all of that kind of thing. So it's definitely worth running that against your database. We have a free offer at the moment also. If you would like to, you can run this against your database, give us the outputted report, and we will analyze it for you, and we will put together a presentation highlighting the top areas of risk that should be addressed. So if you are interested in that, get in touch with myself or in touch with your Oracle account manager, and we can set that up for you. So just on the point of redaction, there is a chain of restaurants in the United States called Dickey's Barbecue, and they were hit with a major data breach where 3 million credit cards were compromised, and then the card details were sold on the dark web, which is what these guys do when they get a hold of sensitive data. So they were served with a lawsuit alleging that the restaurant chain, they didn't implement adequate data security measures. Okay, so they didn't protect and secure customers' credit card information, and that resulted directly then in the breach of the data. So you can see here explicitly stated. So this is the actual lawsuit. This is an actual excerpt from the lawsuit, and the key issue was the sensitive data was both unredacted and unencrypted. Okay, and because of that, they settled for $2.35 million, and you can add significant legal fees and all that kind of thing on top of that. So that issue could have very easily been prevented by both redacting and encrypting the user data. And both of those are done in the Oracle database by purchasing an advanced security license. Okay, so as I said in the previous session, said already today, it's about spending a little bit to avoid a potentially huge business ending fine, or business damaging fine at least. So let's look at some of the technology involved in that concept. So it's Oracle's advanced security product, and it's the second strand we're talking about. So as we said, look, 2 strands with just a very quick recap. So redaction, it'll essentially dynamically mask what a non-privileged user can see. It does not alter the underlying data. TD, as we saw in the last workshop, will encrypt the data on your disk, in your data files, in your backups, and in your exports. So we spoke earlier about data masking. Okay, so what data masking does with your non-production environments is it basically completely transforms data in your tables. So it'll take a value like a credit card and just completely change it. Okay, and that's called static data masking, which is great for your non-production environments. Data redaction is what we would call dynamic data masking. Okay, so the key thing to take is you're not actually altering the underlying data at all. You're just altering what a user can see. Okay, and the great thing with this is, again, there's nothing to install. Okay, everything is done with SQL Plus, Enterprise Manager, tools that you're well used to using. So we've got out of the box redaction templates that can be used, or you can create your own customized templates also. So for an example there would be, we've got a template for redacting MasterCard credit card numbers. Okay, so we can do full redaction, we can do partial redaction. So we can display completely anonymized data, or partially redacted one. We'll look at all of these in a bit more detail now. So full redaction. So what have we got here? So what this is doing, so you can see here we've got in the table, we've got 2 different data types. So we've got name and phone number. So one is a varchar and one is a number. Okay, so you'll see that there'll be a different transformation on each of them based on the character type. Okay, so for a character-based data type, the whole row gets replaced or redacted to a single space. And again, look, just to reiterate, it's not changing anything in the table. It's just limiting what certain users can see. So there you go. That redaction from David Horgan as the name gets redacted to a single space. and then a number gets redacted to a 0. So that's full redaction. We've also got partial redaction. So it's quite a similar concept, but it just redacts part of the data. So some of the original data will remain visible. So for a credit card number, what we could do is something like redact the first 12 characters and display the last 4. And a great use case for that is, if someone is working in a call center, so someone dials in, the verification method might be, tell me the last 4 digits of your credit card. So by redacting the first 12 characters there, we're protecting the sensitive data, but we're still allowing that call operator to be able to do their job, okay? So we're giving them exactly what they need, but no more, okay? So that's exactly what we mean when we talk about the method of least privilege. And that's where data redaction, where the advanced security package comes in. Again, it increased compliance and reduced risk. That's what it's all about, basically. We can reduce the last 4 digits of a social security number, and there is the out-of-the-box customized template, or an out-of-the-box ready-to-go template for that. And we'll see all of this in the demo also. Regular expression redaction. So what this will do is basically look for patterns in the data, so it can examine the structure of existing data and then do a replacement based on that. So we can look for a pattern that just contains characters, and then we'll replace that with a string. So find a first name and change it to just the string redacted. And there's also templates for emails that we can use. There you go. And finally, we've got random redaction. So this will do a like for like swap based on the data. So it'll randomly generate new value for characters. So character for character swap. And then for numbers, it'll do a number for number swap. There you go. And look, we'll see all of these in greater detail in the demo. We'll create redaction policies. We'll alter redaction policies. We'll apply them to tables. So you'll see all this in action shortly. So those are the use cases on the screen here. And these are the appropriate times for where redaction is sufficient. So what it'll do is hide data presented in static read-only pages. Who can bypass that? So if you've got the DBA privilege within the database, you'll be able to bypass the redaction policies and still see the data totally unredacted. As well as this, the true value of the unredacted data can be guessed by inference. So if someone has access to be able to write customized SQL and put in a where clause, they will be able to guess the underlying value based on that. We'll see that in the demo. So really the key thing is to take that there is loopholes to get around it. And if the use cases here, if these are red flags for you, data masking would actually be a better fit for you. And just before we move on to the demo, customer success story there. So Wind Hellas, they're an integrated telecoms provider in Greece. So what they were looking to do was become more GDPR compliant, and advanced security helped them with that to minimize risks of breaches and increase their compliance with the GDPR with minimum performance impact. So hopefully that gives you a good foundation, and we'll tie all of that in together now with a demo. Okay, so that's all working. So just to show you, so when you want to do this, you just come into Live Labs environment. So during our Julianne, if you could maybe just put the link to Live Labs into the chat for everyone to join. So when you come in, it's there's a page like this displayed for you. So there's a bunch of different ones here. There's there's dozens of these that might be of interest to you. So if you haven't used this before, it's definitely worth having a look through it. So for this one, just to show you some of the available workshops here, you can click into DBA. There's lots of different ones that will be pertinent to database administrator. So there's lots of different ones. So there's performance ones, there's high availability ones, there's security ones, and all of that kind of thing. So for this one here today, now there are 2 different ones. So if you just type in TDE, and there's data redaction. So you press launch there, it'll take 5 minutes for it to provision all of that stuff for you. And so you can just do reserve workshop on Live Labs there, and it'll take time. And when you get into it, then there's step-by-step instructions to go through it. It's pretty easy to follow. So when it does get to the stage, when if you want to run this yourselves, if you have any issues with it, just ping messages into the chat or the Q&A. Myself and Smita will do our best to help you out. So I've already configured this because it does take about 10 minutes to provision some of the things in here, you know, setting up all the database and web tier and whatever else. So, you know, just so we're not sitting here while all that's happening, that's already done. So let's crack on with it. So what we'll do is, so it's set up a database in there for us, and there is pluggable database PDBs. There's 2 PDBs in there. Okay, we're just going to use one. So log into the first one. So what we'll do is we're going to create a table space, and we'll create a couple of users. Okay, so one's going to be called encrypted user, and that user will hold all the data that we're going to redact. We'll then create a user called viewer. Okay, and that user will need to be able to read the data from encrypted users table, but because viewer is the non-privileged user, they'll see the redacted version. So we'll create the redaction policies throughout, and we'll see how that affects what a non-privileged user can see. So first up, let's create the table space. So pretty simple, create table space encrypt_ts data file. Yep. Okay, and now we're going to create some users and give them some very basic grants just to get in. So create user, encrypted user, give them a password, tell them where to store their schema objects, give it some quota on the table space, give it create session, create table, and then create the viewer user. Okay, so we've now got 2 users set up with some very basic privileges there. So let's log into the pluggable database directly as the encrypted user, and we'll create a basic table in there and put in some rows. So it's going to be quite sensitive data, as you can see. So SQL Plus, and we're logging directly into the pluggable database there. There we go. So let's create the table now. So the rows in it, so the table is called data table. So the columns in it, we've got name, email, social security number, salary, credit card number, date of birth, department, and role within the organization. So very sensitive data, as you can see. So that's the table created. So now we're going to put 2 rows into that. Okay, and let's have a look at that. So there you go. So we've got names, email addresses, social security numbers, salary, credit card numbers, date of birth, role, department, everything. So totally unredacted at the moment, as you can see. Okay. So now let's log back in as this. PDB. What we'll do is give the viewer user the ability to see that table. There we go. So let's log in as the viewer user and have a look at that table now. So as you can see right now, the viewer user can see everything in the encrypted users table totally unredacted, which we would expect because we've given its rights to do it and we haven't created any redaction policies now. So let's start redacting that. So we'll do 1 column at a time, and we'll do all this as sys, okay? And we'll then connect as viewer, and we'll rerun the query every time and just show you the impact and show you the changes every time. So we'll just step through it nice and easy. So we'll create a policy on the table now. So first we're going to use an inbuilt template to mask the last 4 digits of the social security number. So that's going to be a partial redact with an inbuilt template. So let's log in as sys. Okay, now, so this is the script to create a policy. So you can see here, add policy. So which schema is it in? The encrypted user. What's the name of the object in the schema? Data table. Okay. Well, we have to give the policy name a name. So we're going to call it redact underscore data table. Which column within this table is affected? Social security number. So this one here. Function type, these are inbuilt obviously. So we're going to do a partial redaction. Function parameter, so this is telling it to use the inbuilt template called redact underscore United States Social Security, last four. Okay. So let's go back in as the viewer user and take a look at how that looks right now. So now as viewer, there you can see the last four digits have now been redacted in that column. Now, if you logged in as sys and reran that query, you'd still be able to see it, okay? Because a DBA user is not affected by these redaction privileges. So having the DBA role actually overrides redaction policies. So let's go back in as sys again. So next up, we're going to create a redaction template to mask the email address, okay? So this is going to use regular expression functionality that we spoke about. So you'll see it in the syntax. It's an inbuilt function. We're going to swap the username and domain of an email to just X's. So you'll see that now shortly. So we're not adding a new policy for this. You don't have to add a new policy every time, but what you can do is alter the policy, okay? So it's still the same policy name here. So still the same table, still the same schema, will be every time. So we're just interested in this one here. So column name is email. Okay, function type is regular expression, and this is telling it which way to do it. So again, let's see that now as the viewer user. Okay, so now that's changed completely. So the name has been changed to X's and the domain has been changed to X's. So that's two columns done. So let's keep going with that. Back into the pluggable database. So what we're going to do now is put a random redaction on the salary column. So this will look at the data type and it'll completely swap and randomize the values. Okay, so because it's a numeric column, it'll change like for like, so number for number. So it's going to be quite realistic. Okay. Okay, so again, what's the column name? Salary, and we're just altering the policy. Okay, so there's the function type, random. There we go. So let's see that. So it's changed here. Okay, so you can see previously that was 50,000 and 70,000. So that's changed. So it's just doing it randomly on the fly every time. So let's rerun it. There you can go, changes every time. And again, so that hasn't changed in the underlying tables, but it has changed here. Now you remember previously I said about guessing from inference. So if you can write customized SQL, if you can plug in a where clause, you can probably guess the underlying. So that is one limitation that has to be highlighted as part of this. So if you were to run a query like this as the viewer user, so we know that one of those, the actual true underlying value there for this one is 70,000 for Larry Buckley. Okay, so let's put in this query. So select all from encrypted user data table where salary is greater than 69,000 and less than 71,000. So we know that's going to display everyone whose true value is 70,000. So as you can see, it's just cut it down to one now. Now it still displays a redacted value, but it has ruled out the other user based on the true underlying value. So that's just one to certainly bear in mind as you go forward. So again, the use case is static read-only pages. So if this is a problem for you, data masking and subsetting is probably a better product in that instance. So you can see it's changed. It'll keep changing. We can do it every time. So the value changes every time still. Okay. So there you go. So next up, what we do next, let's do the name column. Back in again. So what we'll do with this one is a regular expression one here too. So what this is going to do is look for any characters in this column and just swap those characters for the word redacted in brackets. So let's see how that policy is created or altered in this case. So alter policy. So the name column. So we're using this regular expression one, and then we're plugging in a pattern and a replace string here. So this is the pattern it's looking for, which is basically just to say, look for any characters. And this one here, replace it with this. Okay. So that's created now. Let's go back in as the viewer user and see how that looks. So now you can see the name column changed just totally to redacted. So really useful. So you can see as it goes along, just having this kind of thing, the fact that a non-privileged user can now only see bits of the data, that you're reducing your risk bit by bit. Okay, it is an incremental process, but it does add up to a much more secure environment. Okay, so let's do the credit card one now. So for that one, we will swap the first 12 characters for a hash character and just leave the last 4. So let's do that again, assist. So there you go, credit card long numbers, the column here. So partial redaction, hash characters from place 1 to place 12 in the string. Okay. See how that looks now. So you can see bit by bit we've come along. So name has been redacted, email's been changed to xxx@xxx.com. Social security number has been redacted, salary is redacted every time on the fly. Credit card long number is now redacted also. First 12 characters are hash characters, the last 4 still displayed. So we've got date of birth, department, and role still in there. So let's fly through those ones as well. So we'll do a full redaction on the role column here. Okay, so this time, rather than partial as we did in the previous one, we're telling it to redact fully. Okay. Let's see how that one looks. So you can see the role has been totally redacted. Okay, so remember with a character one that redacts, it's to a single space. Now, if that was a numeric data type, it would redact to a 0. So the role column is empty there now as well. So there's 2 more left. So date of birth and department. We'll just do these 2 together quickly. SIG plus sysdba. So for the what do we have? Department, we're just going to change this to the word department. So this is a regular expression, pattern-based one. So we're looking for any characters, and we're going to replace it with the string just department. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward one. The next one, we're going to do the date of birth. We're going to change it to the 1st of January of the year. Okay, so partial month 1, day 1, and just leave the year as it is. Okay, so finally, let's see how that all looks now. Okay, so the last couple there. So it's changed to 1st of January, department, role is blank. Okay, so we've totally redacted the whole table there now. So that's how it looks for viewer. So total redaction. So let's just go back in as sys though for 1 second, okay? So rerun the same query. Now, SIS can see everything totally unredacted because, again, it's because it has the DBA privilege, okay? So again, it just highlights the whole thing that the data hasn't been changed anywhere. It's just changing on the fly every time you run a command here, okay? So it's redacted for viewer, unredacted for SIS. So what about the schema owner itself? Let's check that. Let's log in as the encrypted user. So run it as encrypted user, table in its own schema, and it's redacted, okay? So that might be no use for you, okay? But we can create an exemption for that user. So log back in as SIS, because of the fact that it's in its own schema, you might want it to be able to see that data. So you can do it on a case-by-case basis. So if you're happy with it seeing redacted data, happy days, just leave it as it is. If you're not, then you can create an exemption. So let's see how the exemption is created. So alter the policy and just tell it just to leave it alone for the encrypted user, basically. Okay, so let's go back in and check it. And there you go. So previously the encrypted user, it couldn't see anything. Now everything is totally unredacted for it. And just to show that the policy still applies to the viewer user, just that we've only done that exemption purely for one user. There you go. So back in as viewer, we're logged in as viewer here. Everything is still redacted there. So that's it basically. So the key thing, the data remains the same on the disk, in the tables, wherever, and any masking is just done on the fly. Redaction policies won't apply to DBA users and users granted explicit exemptions. So it works really well. You've got lots of different redaction templates and methodologies, and it does make the data look quite realistic. So however you want to do it, it's very flexible. So that's pretty much everything in the presentation and the demo, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got something out of it. So thanks again for joining, guys. Hope you have a great day.